Hello everyone. Today I will be teaching a short economics lesson about economies of scale and how this concept explains the competitive advantage of McDonald's in the fast food industry. So McDonald's is one of the largest quick service restaurant companies in the world, operating thousands of locations globally. In this lesson, we will examine how the size of McDonald's operations allows the company to reduce its average costs compared to smaller competitors. So my chosen assumption is that McDonald's benefits from economies of scale because its large size and franchising system reduce its average cost per unit. So McDonald's operates thousands of restaurants worldwide and uses a franchising model where many locations are owned by franchising operators. Because of this massive scale, McDonald's can purchase ingredients in bulk, negotiate lower supplier prices, and spread fixed costs across a large number of restaurants and products. This gives McDonald's a significant cost advantage compared to smaller independent restaurants. By the end of this lesson, I will expect students to be able to define economies of scale, understand how increasing production lowers average costs, interpret economic cost graphs, apply this concept to McDonald's real-world operations, and solve a cost-based economics problem. So, what are economies of scale? Economies of scale occur when a company's average cost per unit decreases as production increases. In other words, when a company produces more output, the cost of producing each individual unit becomes lower. There are several reasons this happens. First, large firms can purchase inputs in bulk, which lowers the price of materials. Secondly, they can use specialized labor and more efficient technology. And third, large companies can spread fixed costs like equipment, buildings, and management across more units of production. Because of these advantages, large firms often operate more efficiently than smaller firms. So on this graph, the horizontal axis represents the quantity of output produced, while the vertical axis represents the cost per unit. The curve slopes downward in the early portion of the graph, and this downward slope represents economies of scale, where increasing production lowers the average cost. This directly relates to McDonald's because the company produces millions of food items every day across thousands of restaurants, and this massive production allows McDonald's to spread costs across very large output, lowering its cost per burger compared to the smaller restaurants. Again, the x-axis represents the level of production, while the y-axis represents the average cost per unit on the realistic cost versus production graph. So this curve shows the production as production increases, the average cost decreases, as you can see on the graph. So this happens because companies can purchase ingredients in bulk, improve operational efficiency, and spread fixed costs across more units. So for McDonald's, producing and selling millions of burgers every day allows the company to reduce its cost per item much more efficiently than small restaurants that sells only a few hundred meals per day. So now let's examine some real data that supports this idea. So on this side we have real data evidence from part 2 of McDonald's economies of scale. So McDonald's operates at a massive global network of restaurants. About 95% of its locations are franchised, which is basically all of their locations, which is insane. So franchising helps reduce operating costs because many expenses are handled by franchise owners rather than corporate headquarters. Additionally, McDonald's global supply chain allows the company to purchase ingredients such as beef, potatoes, and packaging in extremely large quantities. Also, these factors reduce input costs and spread fixed costs across large output, basically confirming that McDonald's benefits from economies of scale. So next, on the McDonald's versus small firm cost advantage graph, we see the horizontal axis represents the firm size, while the vertical axis represents the average cost per unit on the left. So the graph, this graph shows that the larger firm has a lower cost average than the small firm. So the one on the right, McDonald's scale, has a lower cost than the firm on the left, which is just a smaller scale firm. So this reflects McDonald's business model, where its large scale and franchising system allow it to operate more efficiently than small independent restaurants. So let me go back to the previous slide. So basically the franchising makes it so McDonald's can use people to franchise their restaurant, and they can eliminate almost half of the cost it would be to run it by themselves, because they have franchise owners taking in a percentage of the income, but spending all this money on operating costs, equipment, and stuff like that. So moving on, the fixed cost spreading graph this graph demonstrates how fixed costs are spread across more units as output increases. So fixed costs include expenses such as equipment, buildings, and management. So when production increases, these costs are divided across more units, which lowers that fixed cost per unit. So this is another reason why large firms like McDonald's lower average costs than smaller firms. Now we can move to our practice problems, since we just learned all of this stuff about McDonald's and economies of scale. So now I'll ask you guys I'm going to give you our prompt, and then I will ask you the questions. So, a small burger company produces 1,000 burgers per day with total cost of $5,000. McDonald's produces 10,000 burgers per day with total cost of $30,000. So, step one would be calculating average costs using the formula. And average cost equals total cost divided by quantity for the small firm. So, what is the average cost per burger for each firm? Which firm benefits more from economies of scale? And explain why the larger firm has cost advantage. So, step one, calculating average cost using the formula. Average cost equals total cost divided by quantity. So for the small firm, 5,000 divided by 1,000 equals $5 per burger. For McDonald's, 30,000 divided by 10,000 equals $3 per burger. And so this shows that McDonald's has the lower cost per burger, demonstrating economies of scale. So next, we have our mini quiz. So question one, what happens to average cost when a firm experiences economies of scale? Second question, why does franchising help McDonald's reduce costs? Third, franchising, graphs got all messed up here. Third, if output increases and average cost decreases, what economic concept is being shown? Question 4 is a scenario. If McDonald's expands globally and spreads fixed costs across more locations, how will this affect its cost per unit? So, answer 1. Average cost decreases. And our explanation is economies of scale mean costs fall as output rises. Question 2, this is the answer. Franchising shifts costs and increases efficiency. So basically, franchise owners cover many operating expenses and it reduces corporate cost burden. Question 3, our answer is economies of scale. Why? Decreasing average cost with higher production is the definition of economies of scale. We learned that earlier. Question 4, our answer is cost per unit will decrease because fixed costs are spread over more units, lowering average cost and increasing efficiency. And a common mistake is students confuse economies of scale a lot with profit. Economies of scale reduce costs, not necessarily increase demand. So to conclude up economies of scale, and explain why McDonald's can operate more efficiently than smaller competitors, as McDonald's increases, average costs fall back due to bulk purchasing, specialization, and the spreading of fixed costs. So McDonald's global scale and franchising model allow it to maintain lower costs per unit, giving the company a strong competitive advantage in the fast food industry. So that is the final slide of our presentation. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned how to explain economies of scale.